She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even pause. Celia Tranier saw her billionaire husband sitting across from his ex, laughing, under soft golden light, and walked away like she never knew him. And in that moment, under the chandelier of Chicago's most exclusive lounge, his power didn't just slip. It vanished, not because of a scandal, not because she exposed him, but because she didn't fight to be chosen. Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories, the place where stories aren't just told, they teach. If you've ever been in a relationship where silence spoke louder than words, where respect cracked quietly behind luxury walls, this one is for you. The city stretched beneath her penthouse window like a painting, frozen and distant. Celia Tranier stood barefoot in silk pajamas, sipping from a navy mug she'd owned since college. It had a faded quote on the side, "Love builds what power can't." She stared at the skyline, not blinking. On the marble kitchen counter behind her, Darian's assistant had left her favorite green juice again. Right flavor, right time, but not from him. Celia didn't touch it. She didn't need health. She needed truth. The penthouse was quiet. Too quiet. No hum of conversation, no music. Just the ticking of a wall clock that felt too loud. Celia Tranier had been Mrs. Darian Holt for 4 years. The tabloids called them Chicago's royal pair. She was the reserved, elegant designer with quiet power. He was the steel and tech billionaire whose face graced the covers of Fortune and Forbes before 40. They had the look, the name, the wealth, but none of it mattered when she sat across from no one at the breakfast table. And Darian? He hadn't been home before midnight in weeks. The last time they had dinner together, he spent most of it answering work calls. She had cut her steak, chewed in silence, and stared at the man she used to laugh with. The man who once called her his stillness in a storm. Now he was the storm. And she no longer held an umbrella. It wasn't one moment that broke things. It was all the small ones. The way he stopped asking about her projects. The way his kisses faded into polite brushes. The way he texted running late like it was his full-time job. 2 months ago, Celia launched her own design studio. A risky move. A bold one. She expected him to say, "I'm proud of you." He said, "Is the market even strong for that right now?" He didn't mean to hurt her, but that was the problem. He no longer noticed when he did. There was a time he looked at her like she was the world. They met 6 years ago at a charity event hosted in an abandoned warehouse she'd helped convert into an art gallery. She wore all black, hair pinned up, notebook in hand. He wore a tailored grey suit and a look of curiosity. "I heard you turned concrete into beauty," he said. "And you turn money into skyboxes," she replied. They laughed. He asked her to dinner that night. Not a 5-star place. A Thai food truck under the L train. They sat on a bench, eating noodles from cardboard bowls. That night, he kissed her forehead and said, "You're the first person who doesn't care what I own." She said, "Own me with truth, not things." And for a while, he did. The shift wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. He stopped leaving her notes on the bathroom mirror. He started sleeping with his phone under the pillow. He stopped noticing the scent of her perfume. He started complimenting other people's Instagram-worthy moments, but stopped saying anything about her sketches. Celia once told her friend, "It feels like I'm married to a PR version of him. The real one. Left months ago." But she stayed, because sometimes leaving felt like failing. Every Thursday used to be their day. He'd bring her fresh-cut tulips. She'd cook something new, usually too spicy, but he'd eat it anyway. They'd drink wine on the couch, toes touching, talking about nothing important. Now, orchids arrived every Thursday, delivered by his staff. He didn't even remember when she stopped liking orchids. Last Thursday, she left them in the box. Darian didn't ask why. He didn't notice. That morning, as she dressed for her own client meeting, Celia looked at her reflection and saw someone she didn't recognize. Her eyes weren't sad. They were still like a lake before a storm. She put on her navy trench coat, grabbed her portfolio and whispered, "To no one, if I have to beg to matter." Then I already don't. She didn't know that by nightfall, her stillness would become a hurricane, not of destruction, but of departure. Let's pause here. Have you ever felt invisible in your own relationship? Not from betrayal, but from silence? Tell us below. Your comment might be the one someone else needs to read today. And if stories like this speak to you, subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories. We tell the kind of love stories that remind you who you are. Celia arrived at the design firm at exactly 9 a.m. as always. She greeted her assistant with a soft smile and walked straight into her studio. Natural light streamed through the tall windows. Her drafting table stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by mood boards and concept sketches. But for the first time in weeks, she couldn't focus. Her hand hovered over a sketch she'd been refining for days. An open-air art pavilion meant to evoke movement and light. Today, it felt lifeless. Because last night, when Darian said he had a late dinner meeting with investors, she knew he was lying. It wasn't the words that gave him away. It was the way he didn't look up from his phone when he said them. She sat down, closed the sketchbook, and pulled her phone from her coat pocket. Nothing from him, not even a check-in. He used to text her midday, silly messages, a photo of his coffee, even the occasional miss you when he was in meetings all day. Now, nothing. She stared at the screen for a moment, then put it face down. The truth was louder in the quiet. Celia, her assistant said, popping in gently. Your 11 a.m. moved to noon. Celia nodded. Thank you. She glanced at the time. It was only 9:30. Time moved slowly when you felt everything falling apart. Back at her desk, she picked up a pencil, began to shade. Her hands moved, but her thoughts drifted. They always met her there, at the corners of her work, in the space between lines. Darian called her just before noon. Hey, he said, his voice smoother than necessary. I might not make it back until late. She didn't respond right away. You'll be at Elara Noir? He paused. How do you know that? Celia closed her eyes. I didn't, she said. You just confirmed it. Darian exhaled through the phone. It's just a quick thing, a meeting. With whom? A potential partner. The silence on her end stretched. Marielle's in town, isn't she? Celia asked. He didn't answer fast enough. Celia nodded slowly, though he couldn't see it. You should have told me, she said. It's not what you're thinking. Then why hide it? Still, he said nothing. I'll see you at home, she said, and ended the call. She didn't plan to go to the lounge. She didn't need to. She'd already seen what mattered. But by 7 p.m., something changed. She couldn't explain it. A tug in her chest. A quiet ache in her throat. She got in her car, drove downtown. She didn't call first, didn't text, didn't tell anyone. She parked half a block away and sat in the driver's seat for 5 minutes before getting out. Elara Noir stood like a monument to everything they once wanted. Elegant, cold, untouchable. She walked toward the entrance, coat pulled tight against the wind. She didn't rehearse what she'd say, because some moments aren't meant for words. Inside, the warmth greeted her first, then the music, then the scent of aged whiskey and soft leather. A hostess moved to welcome her. Mrs. Holt, your husband's already inside. Celia nodded once and walked past her. She already knew where he'd be. The corner table, always reserved for him. She turned, and there he was. His back was to her at first, shoulders relaxed, one arm resting casually along the back of the velvet bench, a drink in hand, his face lit by candlelight. And across from him, Marielle. Celia knew it was her, even from behind. Sleek dark hair, red lips, perfect posture. She leaned in as she laughed at something Darian said. Their hands didn't touch, but they didn't need to. There was an intimacy in the air between them. Celia stood still. And then Darian turned. Their eyes locked. In that moment, she saw it all. Recognition, regret, panic. He stood too fast. His glass toppled. People looked up. Heads turned. Celia didn't flinch. She didn't move. She just turned around and walked out. Darian rushed after her. "Celia, wait," he called, weaving through the tables. She was already at the curb. He caught up, grabbing her arm gently. "Celia, please. Let me explain." She looked at him, calm and quiet. "You were laughing." Darian froze. "We were just catching up. She's in town for a conference. You didn't tell me she was back. I didn't think it mattered." "That's exactly the problem," she said. She stepped back. He looked around, suddenly aware of people watching. "Not here," he said. "Let's go home." She nodded, but not because she agreed, because something inside her had already decided. They didn't speak in the car, not one word. He glanced at her once, as if waiting for her to yell, cry, accuse him. She didn't. She looked out the window the whole time. When they reached the penthouse, she walked in first, went straight to the bedroom, closed the door. He stood in the kitchen, unsure of what to do. He pulled out his phone, opened their message thread, typed, deleted. He put it down. Upstairs, Celia sat on the edge of the bed, took off her earrings slowly, and placed them on the nightstand. She stared at the wall across from her for a long time, not angry, just done. Celia didn't sleep much that night. The bedroom was quiet, but her thoughts weren't. She laid still, eyes open in the dark, her back to Darian. The sheets between them felt like walls. He didn't reach for her, didn't speak, didn't move. It was the kind of silence that didn't invite peace. In the morning, she got out of bed first. No words passed between them as she went into the bathroom. She showered, dressed, tied her hair up neatly. Every motion precise, deliberate, quiet. By the time she stepped into the kitchen, Darian was seated at the island. His shirt was only half buttoned, no tie. A mug of coffee sat in front of him, untouched. He looked up, tired eyes, jaw tight. "You're mad," he said. Celia raised a brow, but said nothing. He sighed and leaned back in the chair. "I get it, but you have to trust me." She poured hot water into her mug, dropped in a bag of chamomile, no sugar, no honey. He watched her, his hands folded in front of him. "She reached out last week," he continued. "Marielle. Said she was coming into town for a conference. Wanted to talk about a business pitch." Celia sipped her tea, waited. "I didn't want to cause drama. I figured a short meeting wouldn't hurt." "You figured I didn't need to know," she said, voice calm. Darian looked away. "I thought it was harmless. You thought wrong." He tapped the table with one finger, once. "It wasn't personal." Celia let out a quiet breath, not quite a laugh. "That's the problem." She walked to the window, looked out at the skyline. Chicago was alive and moving. She didn't feel either of those things. "I built a life with you," she said. "Helped you build yours. I made this place a home, and you sat across from a woman who already had her chance, like I was invisible. I wasn't thinking about it that way. I know." Darian stood and walked toward her. "I messed up." Celia turned to face him. Her expression didn't change. "This isn't about a dinner or a meeting. This is about who I've become in your life." She let the silence hang. "I used to be your first call. Now I'm the one you explain things to afterward." He reached for her hand. She pulled it back, gently but firmly. "I need to go," she said. "To where?" "Work." She turned, picked up her bag, and walked out the door. At the design studio, the day moved slowly. She stared at her computer screen for too long before opening the file she was supposed to revise. Her mind wandered, again and again, to the night before, to the look on Darian's face, to the sound of her heels on the marble as she walked out of that lounge. She hadn't cried. She still didn't. Tears would have felt like giving something weight that didn't deserve it anymore. Her assistant knocked gently. "Your noon client is here." Celia nodded and stood, smoothing her blouse. Time to switch, smile, work, perform. After her meetings, Celia sat alone in her office. A cup of tea in one hand, a sketchbook in the other. She flipped through pages of her recent work. Her lines felt sharp, intentional, strong. Nothing soft lived in these pages anymore. Not because she was angry, but because she was done waiting to be seen. Her phone buzzed. A message from Darian. "Dinner tonight? Just us. I'll cook." She stared at it, typed nothing, closed the screen. Then she picked up her pencil and kept drawing. Celia didn't go home right after work. Instead, she drove aimlessly through the city. The same streets she used to wander when she first moved to Chicago, back when she had nothing but her portfolio and a rented room with creaky floors. She passed a bookstore she once loved, a bakery that used to know her name, and the bench where she and Darian had shared hot chocolate one freezing November night, 2 months before he proposed. They were different people then, hungry, laughing, grateful for each other. Now, everything felt curated, measured, filtered. Luxury had replaced love, and silence had replaced honesty. She parked near the Riverwalk, took a seat on a quiet bench, and let the city move without her. Her phone vibrated again. "Darian, still want to talk? Made your favorite. I'm home." Back at the penthouse, the air was thick with the smell of garlic and rosemary. He'd made pasta, handmade, she could tell. He stood in the kitchen, apron over a white button-down, sleeves rolled. "You came," he said softly. Celia didn't answer. She took off her coat, draped it over the back of the chair, and sat down. There were candles, wine poured, real plates, not take-out containers. He plated the food and joined her, eyes searching her face. She picked up her fork, ate in silence. It was good, warm, familiar, but the taste didn't reach her heart. "Thank you," she said, setting the fork down. "I know I've been distant," he said. "I didn't mean to be." "You didn't notice becoming it." Darian swallowed hard. "I thought success would give us more time, more peace. But I kept running. From what? Maybe from stillness, from needing someone. I never asked you to need me," she said. "I asked you to be with me." He leaned forward. "I'm still here." She looked at him. "No, you're present, but not with me." He reached for her hand again. This time, she let him. His thumb brushed hers slowly. "I miss when we were broke and happy," he said. "Then why did we trade it for rich and lonely?" He didn't answer. She stood, walked toward the window. "I don't want grand gestures, Darian. I don't want a perfect dinner. I want to be your truth again, not your audience." He stood too, slowly. "I want to fix this." She turned. "Then stop trying to fix me with it." They stood in the silence between who they used to be and what they were now. She picked up her coat. "I'm going to stay at the studio tonight." "Celia, I need space, not to punish you, but to remember what I sound like when I'm not being managed." She walked to the door, paused. "I'm not leaving because of Marielle. I'm leaving because somewhere along the way, I disappeared, and you didn't notice." The door clicked shut behind her. Darian stood alone in a room full of everything he'd ever wanted, except the one person who gave it meaning. Elara Noir didn't look like a lounge from the outside. It looked like a bank vault designed by a poet. The building sat quiet on the corner of the Gold Coast, with frosted glass, polished, bronze accents, and a minimalist logo that didn't even include its name. You had to know it to enter. Celia hadn't been there in over a year. The last time, Darian had rented the entire place for her birthday. They'd eaten under a custom light fixture she'd designed, soft golden rods twisted like constellations. She remembered how his hand had rested on the small of her back all night, how he laughed too loud when the band played her favorite song, how he leaned in and whispered, "Still the best thing I ever built." Now, she stood outside the same entrance, staring through the tinted doors. Darian's car was parked in front. His driver stood beside it, chatting quietly with the valet. Her fingers curled slightly around the strap of her purse. She didn't want to come. She'd already made her decision to take space. But something told her if she didn't see it, if she didn't face what he was choosing, she'd never forgive herself for doubting her instincts. She wasn't a jealous woman, but tonight, she wasn't walking in as a wife. She was walking in as a witness. Inside, the air was warm, intimate. A low jazz trio played in the far corner. Gold light reflected off black marble. Voices were hushed, private. The hostess smiled as Celia approached. "Mrs. Holt, would you like to be escorted to—" Celia shook her head. "No, thank you." She didn't need help. She already knew where to look. The back corner booth, always his favorite. She turned slowly, and there he was, Darian Holt, her husband, wearing the same soft grey suit he wore the night he proposed. He looked comfortable, confident. His smile was easy. He raised his glass in a half-toast, and across from him sat Marielle Vaughan, hair sleek and tucked behind one ear, lips red, dress black, neck bare, exposed like she knew it mattered. Her elbow was on the table, fingers just near his, not touching, but too close not to mean something. They weren't leaning in. They weren't whispering, but they were familiar. Celia didn't move. She stood still, surrounded by warmth and candlelight, and felt absolutely nothing inside. Not rage, not heartbreak, just clarity. She took one slow breath. Then Darian turned his head and saw her. Everything stopped. His body jolted slightly. His eyes widened. He stood too fast. His drink spilled. Marielle flinched. Celia didn't blink. She turned and walked out. Outside, the air was colder now. She didn't shiver. Her heels hit the pavement with quiet rhythm as she walked toward the curb. She heard the door open behind her. "Celia." Darian's voice was sharp, desperate. He caught up with her as she reached the end of the block. "Celia, wait, please. Let me explain." She turned slowly. His face was flushed. His jaw clenched. She looked directly at him. Calm. "You were laughing," she said. He blinked. "We were catching up. It's not what it looked like. You didn't tell me she was back. I didn't think it mattered." She tilted her head. "Exactly." He stepped closer. "Let's go home, please. Let's talk there." She looked past him for a second. Back at the glowing windows of the lounge, people were still watching. "I'm not going back there with you," she said quietly. Darian reached for her hand. She pulled away. "I told you I needed space," she said. "And this told me exactly why." She turned and crossed the street, not looking back. Celia didn't go back to the studio that night. Instead, she booked a quiet suite at a hotel in Lincoln Park. Not because it was far from home, but because it didn't feel like home at all. She needed that. A clean room, crisp sheets, no memories lingering in corners, no orchids waiting on marble countertops, just stillness and the sound of her own breathing. She turned off her phone. She didn't want apologies. She didn't want more words. She wanted to remember what silence felt like when it belonged to her, and not to the space between her and Darian. The following morning, sunlight slipped past the sheer curtains. Celia sat at the edge of the bed in a robe, her feet bare against the carpet, sipping plain black coffee. She stared at the ceiling for a long time, wondering when exactly she started living in a house full of things but none of herself. She had given so much, and he hadn't even noticed what had gone missing. By noon, she was back at her studio, alone. No clients, no calls. She needed to work, but her hands didn't move. Not yet. She lit a candle and sat at her drafting table, flipping through old sketches. Pages filled with curves and light, detail and emotion. She used to design spaces that breathed, that whispered, that held stories. And now? Now she was the one rebuilding. Darian didn't sleep. He sat on the balcony of the penthouse all night, waiting for her to come back. He'd left the porch light on, as if she needed help finding her way home. She didn't. He stared out at the skyline, watching the city stretch in all directions. It looked powerful, cold, endless, exactly like the version of himself he had become. Marielle had left shortly after Celia did, her expression unreadable. "I didn't plan this," she had said at the table. But I can't say I didn't hope for it. He didn't respond. She stood, fixed her lipstick in the reflection of her phone, and walked out like she hadn't broken something. But it wasn't her fault. Not fully. He had made choices. Not affairs. Not betrayal in the usual way. But in moments, in carelessness, in omission, he had let his wife drift into the background of his life, confident she would stay. Because that's what strong women do, right? They stay until they don't. He texted her the next morning. No reply. Called straight to voicemail. He left one message. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm not going to spin this. You were right. You deserve better than my silence. And if there's a way back, I'll wait. He didn't try again. Not that day. Celia walked to a nearby park on her lunch break, sitting beneath a tree with her sketchpad on her knees. It was something she hadn't done in years, not since before Darien. She drew quietly, the tip of her pencil moving like memory. At first, lines, then form, then light. She sketched a room. A space filled with tall windows and no doors. Wide, open, full of sunlight. No shadows. It was everything she wanted to feel again. Open, light, free. Her phone buzzed. A text from her best friend, Calla. You okay? I heard Darien skipped the board lunch today. Celia smiled faintly. She replied, I'm better than okay. I'm remembering myself. At the penthouse, Darien sat in her reading chair. He hadn't touched it in years. She always curled up there after work, reading interior design magazines or doodling in a notepad. Sometimes she'd fall asleep before finishing a page. He used to sit on the couch and just watch her. He remembered the first apartment they shared. Celia cooking in oversized sweaters. No marble counters, no hired help. Just steam on the windows and laughter in the hallway. They had been happy. Then he started building, and somehow he forgot to take her with him. She had come, but not all the way. He made space for her in the house, but not in the climb. And when she stopped showing him her sketches, he thought it was just time. Not sadness. Now he knew. It was withdrawal, not from love, but from hope. 2 days passed. Celia didn't go home. She met with clients, ran her firm, paid invoices, answered emails. But at night, she lit that same candle at the studio and stared at her sketches. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She planned. She made a list of what she needed to pack, what she would leave behind, what was hers and what was shared. Her initials were etched in the base of a wooden side table they'd bought on a trip to Vermont. He would keep the table, but she would keep her peace. On the third morning, she went back to the penthouse, not to reconcile, to retrieve what still belonged to her. The door opened silently. No codes had been changed. The air smelled like cinnamon. Strange. He never liked candles. There were no fresh orchids, just a quiet space. She moved from room to room quickly, packed her studio supplies, her favorite books, her grandmother's framed lacework. She left the jewelry, left the expensive handbags still in boxes, left the designer shoes he insisted on buying every Christmas. She placed her keys on the entryway table and stood for one last moment. Darien stepped into the room. His shirt was wrinkled, hair uncombed. He didn't speak, neither did she. They looked at each other, not as strangers, but as people who once built a life together and now had no words left to save it. She walked to the elevator, pressed the button. He didn't follow. He just watched the doors close. Quiet, still, gone. The penthouse felt heavier without her. Darien moved through it, like it no longer belonged to him, as if each room whispered back pieces of her that had left with the light. The kitchen was spotless, except for the tea mug she always used. It sat on the drying rack, air-dried days ago, untouched since. He picked it up, turned it in his hands. On the side, the words read, "Love builds what power can't." He remembered when he first saw her drink from it, at her tiny studio apartment, sitting, on the floor, with blueprints spread around them, and her hair tied with a pencil. She had looked up and said, "This quote reminds me why I do what I do." Back then, he thought he understood what it meant. Now he realized he didn't, not until she walked out and didn't look back. 3 floors below, the building concierge handed an envelope to a courier. No return address, only his name on the front. Inside, 1 key card, a set of legal documents, and a handwritten note. The things that matter most aren't always things. I've taken what belongs to me. There's nothing to fight over. I wish you well, Celia. He read it twice. Then, a 3rd time. He wanted to be angry, wanted to believe she was overreacting, that this was dramatic, emotional, unnecessary. But none of it was. She had been measured, calm, deliberate. Celia sat by the window of her new space, a modest loft with exposed brick, tall windows, and uneven floors. It reminded her of the first apartment they shared, before the wealth, before the headlines, before she was a billionaire's wife. She hadn't picked the place to hurt him. She picked it to remember herself. She made tea. No fancy machine, just hot water, a kettle, and the same chamomile she always drank. Then she opened her laptop and sent a quote to a client. Work came easily. Emotion didn't. Calla stopped by that evening with Thai food and zero judgment. They ate cross-legged on the floor. "How are you?" Calla asked, gently. Celia gave a small shrug. Free, not happy, not sad, just free. Calla nodded, handing her a spring roll. Sometimes the biggest wins don't feel like victories. They feel like peace. Celia smiled. She didn't need validation. She just needed the space to feel again. That night, Darian cancelled his appearance at a major real estate panel. His assistant, Morgan, knocked on his door at 8 a.m. the next morning. "You didn't show." The board's asking questions. He sat at his desk, the lights off, the curtains drawn. "They can wait." "You want me to move your investor calls?" "No," he said. "Cancel them." She hesitated. "All of them?" "Yes." Morgan lingered. "They'll want a reason. Tell them I'm handling a structural issue." She didn't push further. Darian wasn't the type to cancel. Ever. Until now. By midweek, Celia hosted her first client meeting in the loft. The room wasn't ready. Boxes were still stacked against the wall, and she didn't have a desk yet. But the client didn't care. He looked around and said, "There's energy in this space. Feels like something real is starting here." Celia smiled. For the first time in weeks, it reached her eyes. She opened her sketchbook. Her fingers moved with ease. She designed a quiet gallery space with curved walls and natural wood. Soft, welcoming, intentional, the kind of space she hadn't felt in her own life for months. Now she was building it on her own terms. Back at the penthouse, Darian stood in her walk-in closet. He hadn't opened the door since she left. Everything was gone, except one thing. Folded on the top shelf, the sweatshirt he used to wear before bed, back when they still cuddled and laughed like kids. It had paint stains from when she made him help repaint the guest room. He picked it up, held it to his chest, and sat down on the floor. For the first time in years, Darian Holt felt powerless. Not because of business, not because of a failed deal, but because the one woman who once saw him before the world did, no longer looked at him at all. Celia didn't look back, not even once. Each day in her loft grew more familiar. The boxes disappeared. Her blueprints spread across new tables. Bookshelves rose like quiet declarations of independence. No staff, no service calls, just her and the scent of wood, paper, and candle wax. Her phone buzzed often, but never from him. Darian had gone quiet. No texts, no flowers, no surprises, no press statements. At first, she expected him to do what he always did, fix things with effort, charm, and power. But nothing came, and oddly, that made the silence easier. Because now she wasn't resisting a storm. She was sitting in calm air, all her own. Darian wasn't quiet because he didn't care. He was quiet because he was realizing he had spoken too late for too long. In every boardroom, he had a voice. On every stage, a microphone. But with her, he hadn't spoken the words that mattered, not when they mattered. He went to the office once, sat in his glass-walled corner suite, and stared out at the skyline they used to walk under holding hands. His assistant placed a folder on his desk. "You need to review these statements for the October quarter." He didn't touch it. Instead, he pulled a photo from his drawer. It was the two of them in Italy, on a random street in Venice, eating gelato, laughing mid-bite. She had no makeup on, hair wild from the wind. He remembered how she squeezed his hand that day and said, "If we ever forget how simple joy feels, promise we'll come back here." He hadn't kept that promise. Now, the memory tasted like something lost forever. Later that evening, Darian stood at the balcony, scrolling through photos on his phone. Most of them were events, awards, real estate tours, photos with political leaders, influencers, billionaire panels. But every few swipes, there she was, Celia on the couch with her sketch pad. Celia at their first Christmas in the penthouse, barefoot in a red sweater. Celia leaning on his shoulder after a long flight. He paused on a video. She was asleep beside him, the screen dim. He had whispered into the camera, "She's the most important thing I ever built." He watched it twice, then closed the phone. He didn't need a reminder. He needed a reality. That same night, Celia sat at her desk, reviewing a lighting plan for a boutique hotel. The window was open. The air smelled like the city again, gritty, full of life, not filtered through thick glass. She smiled without realizing. Her hands moved with clarity. Her sketches had energy again. At 11 p.m., her door buzzed. She stood, heart pausing for just a second. She opened the security feed on her phone. A delivery guy. She pressed the button. "Leave it at the door." After 30 seconds, she opened it and pulled in a small white box. No branding, no card. Inside, a single candle. The same scent she always lit in the penthouse, jasmine and cedarwood. Underneath it, a folded note. No grand gestures, no noise. "I just wanted you to know I noticed." She read it once, then set it on the counter. She didn't light the candle, but she didn't throw it away either. The next morning, she called Calla. "You busy today?" "Always," Calla replied. "But for you, never. I want to do something different." "What are we talking? Facial, road trip, wine tasting, or emotional sabotage?" Celia laughed. "Gallery hunting." Calla paused. "Now that is serious." They spent the day walking through local exhibits, touching walls with their eyes, reading stories told through glass, wood, and steel. By the third gallery, Celia stopped in front of a wide sculpture made of broken window frames. A plaque beneath it read, "Reshaped reflections, because not everything shattered is meant to be discarded." She stared at it for a long time, then pulled out her phone and typed, "Not everything broken is meant to be fixed either. Some things are meant to stay cracked, so the light can pass through." She didn't send it. She just saved it in her notes. But the words stayed with her. That night, she worked late at her drafting table. At one point, she looked up, realized she wasn't thinking about what Darian was doing. She wasn't waiting for him to show up, wasn't wondering what he was saying to anyone else. She was just here, in her life, on her terms, breathing. Celia stood at the corner of her loft, surrounded by samples of textured wallpaper and reclaimed wood panels. A new client wanted warmth, not just aesthetic warmth, but emotional warmth, something that felt like comfort without cliché. She loved challenges like that, and for the first time in a long time, she felt fully present. No clouded thoughts, no lingering what-ifs, just the work in front of her and the freedom to create without editing herself. She turned on a playlist, tied her hair up, and got to work. Hours passed without her realizing. Her fingertips were smudged with charcoal, her lips dry from forgetting to sip water, and her heart surprisingly light. But beneath the focus, a question lived quietly. Was Darian really letting go? Or was he waiting for her to soften first? Across town, Darian sat at a breakfast table surrounded by board members. They spoke numbers, forecasts, shareholder growth. He nodded when appropriate, answered when needed. But his mind kept drifting, to the mug Celia left behind, to her silence, to how easily she'd chosen peace over performance. "You with us, Darian?" one of the older members asked. He blinked back into the room. "Yeah, just reviewing internally." The man chuckled. "Well, let us know when you find the answer." The table laughed. Darian didn't. He glanced at his tablet screen. A calendar full of meetings. None of them mattered. He was solving everyone's problems but his own. That evening, his assistant knocked gently on his office door. "You have a press dinner at 7. Confirmed, please reply." He shook his head. "Cancel it." She hesitated. "It's a major event. You're on the guest list beside the governor." "I won't be attending." She paused. "Want me to offer a reason?" He leaned back, stared at the ceiling. "Tell them the foundation cracked, and I'm still looking for the right tools." She gave a faint smile and left the room. Celia ended her night in sweatpants and socks, eating leftover soup while watching an old design documentary. She never used to eat alone, but now she did it without sadness. Her phone buzzed once. A text from Darian, not asking for answers, just letting you know I miss you. She read it twice, set it down, didn't reply. Not because she didn't feel anything, but because she needed to feel everything without him first. The next morning, she woke early. The city was still asleep, the sky outside a soft grey. She opened her closet and pulled out a folder she hadn't touched in months. Inside, her original vision for her own gallery, not a client's, hers, a space dedicated to emotion through light and form. She'd sketched it years ago, showed it to Darian when they first got married. He'd loved the concept, promised to help fund it when the time was right. The time never came. She always waited, then forgot. Now she remembered, and this time she wouldn't wait for help. She'd build it herself. Later that day, she scheduled 3 site visits. Affordable spaces, nothing flashy, but full of potential. By the third location, a former flower shop with high ceilings and exposed beams, she could see it. What it could become, what she could become. She stood in the middle of the empty floor, arms crossed, heart steady. The leasing agent asked, "Want to think about it?" She shook her head. "No, I'm ready." She signed the paperwork that evening. Meanwhile, Darian sat at home, scrolling through a newsfeed filled with curated lives. Everyone smiling, everyone achieving. He saw photos of his peers, holding hands with polished spouses at galas. It all looked hollow, because he used to have something real. Now he had power, but he couldn't remember the last time that power made him feel human. He closed his laptop, stared at the empty chair across the room, and whispered, "I don't need the world to applaud. I just want her to come home." But no one heard him, and maybe that's what he finally needed. Celia spent the weekend transforming the empty flower shop into something that looked like possibility. She wore jeans, an old hoodie, and her hair in a messy bun. Her fingers were calloused by Monday, her knees sore from crouching on dusty floors, and her spirit calmer than it had been in years. There were no staff, no caterers, no schedules, just her, a blueprint, and a list of what she wanted this space to represent. She didn't want it to be perfect. She wanted it to be hers. The light in the back corner of the shop hit differently in the late afternoon, angled and warm, filtering through a cracked pane of glass. Most people would replace it. She left it. It reminded her of something she'd written in her journal weeks ago. Not everything broken is meant to be fixed. Some things are meant to stay cracked, so the light can get in. Calla arrived with 2 cups of strong coffee and a bag of croissants. "You look like you've been in a relationship with a sledgehammer," she said, handing her one. "I have," Celia replied, grinning. "And unlike Darian, this one listens." Calla raised an eyebrow. "So, jokes now?" "I'm done feeling frozen," Celia said, taking a sip. I wasted months trying to get him to notice I was drifting. He didn't. So now, I'm building something that won't ignore me." Calla glanced around the open space. "You're turning grief into art. That's dangerous." "Why?" "Because it's going to be too good to walk away from." Celia nodded. "That's the point." Back at the penthouse, Darian sat in the guest room, Celia's makeshift reading space. He never used to come in here. It always smelled like lavender and parchment. A blanket she kept on the armchair still held her scent. He picked up one of her books, a memoir by a minimalist designer. Inside the cover, in her handwriting, "Less isn't empty. It's intentional." He closed it. He'd spent years building a life based on more money, more acclaim, more control. And it had cost him the one person who saw value in things without price tags. He walked through the apartment slowly, noticed things he hadn't before. The towel she always folded a certain way. The chipped plate she refused to replace because it was the first one they bought. The dent in the hallway from when they tried to move her drafting table and failed. These weren't just things. They were signs of someone who had built her life alongside his, and he hadn't seen her vanish until she was already gone. Celia's gallery space began to shift shape. The walls were primed, lights installed. Frames leaned against corners, waiting for content. She sat at her desk that night, sketching her opening piece. It wasn't about love lost. It was about love remembered, on her own terms. A beam of glass rising from the center, wrapped in steel coils, with mirrors at the base reflecting upward light. She titled it, Recognition. It was what she had longed for most in her marriage. Not diamonds, not gifts, just to be seen. 3 days later, Darian received an invitation, a square envelope, elegant cream paper, his name in delicate print on the front. Inside, a card that read, Opening Night, a gallery for light and reclamation, by Celia Tranier. No mention of his name, no address to Mr. Holt, just an artist's signature at the bottom. He stared at it for a long time, then placed it on his nightstand like something sacred. Celia didn't send it to provoke him. She sent it because she had nothing to hide. This was her life now, and whether he came or not, this was her beginning. The night of the exhibit, the gallery was lit with soft golden lamps. Guests entered slowly, voices hushed by the energy of the room. Celia stood near the back, wearing a long black dress, hair swept up, eyes clear. She greeted guests, collected hugs, accepted compliments, but her eyes scanned the door once, then not again. She wouldn't wait, not tonight. Calla nudged her. "Don't look for him." "I'm not," Celia lied. Darian arrived late. He didn't enter right away. He stood outside in the cold, hands tucked in his coat pockets, watching as people stepped in and out. He could see her through the window, laughing, confident, a woman he didn't recognize, because he had never let her become that. He waited until the crowd shifted, then stepped inside quietly. He didn't make his presence known. He didn't bring flowers. He walked slowly from piece to piece, reading every title, standing silently in front of Recognition longer than any other. And when she passed by him, only a few feet away, he didn't call her name. She noticed him. Their eyes met. She didn't smile. She didn't look away. She simply nodded. And he nodded back. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a door reopening. It was acknowledgement, quiet, final, complete. That night, as Celia stood alone in the middle of her new gallery, she let the silence fill the room. Not lonely, not longing, just full of breath, of truth, of herself. Have you ever stopped waiting for someone to see you and decided to see yourself instead? Have you ever built something beautiful, not to prove a point, but to remember your worth? Drop a comment below if you've ever chosen peace over being picked. Let's talk about it. And if stories like this remind you of your strength, hit that like button, subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories, and share this with someone who needs to hear. Your silence doesn't mean weakness. It means power. Darian didn't speak to anyone at the gallery. He didn't approach Celia, didn't make a scene, didn't explain or ask for a second chance. He didn't need to. She had already given him her answer. A nod. That was all. Not an invitation, not an opening. Just a full stop that came without punctuation. He left the gallery before the final guests did. As he stepped out onto the quiet Chicago street, the cold bit into his collar. But he didn't pull his coat tighter. He welcomed the chill. It reminded him he could still feel something. That was new. He hadn't felt much in years. Not really. Only now, standing alone under city lights and invisible among the crowd, did he realize how much of his life had been built around being seen by everyone but the one who mattered. Marielle called 2 days later. He let it ring the first time. The second time, he answered. "I saw the gallery coverage," she said. "You went." He didn't respond. "They're calling it the return of raw design." She made an impression. He leaned back in his office chair, staring at the skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. "I'm not in the mood for commentary." Marielle laughed lightly. "Always so cold when you're losing." He didn't answer that either. She shifted her tone. "Listen, I'm not trying to compete. We had one dinner. That's all." He waited. "And," he said, "I came back because I thought there was unfinished business. You and I, what we had, it never closed properly. It closed the day I married Celia." She exhaled. "Then why did you meet me?" "I thought I could control the conversation." "And you couldn't?" "No." There was a pause. Then she said, "That's what makes her dangerous, isn't it? She doesn't yell. She doesn't fight. She just walks." Darian didn't respond. Because it was true, and it scared him more than any shouting ever could. At the gallery, Celia moved through her second week of guests with grace and quiet detachment. She wasn't performing. She wasn't selling herself. She was just available, and that made her radiant. Critics called her work a mirror. They said her pieces didn't tell people what to feel. They made them confront what they were already feeling. She liked that. It wasn't about pain. It was about reflection. She wasn't trying to be provocative. She was simply done being edited. That Friday, after closing, she sat on the gallery floor with Calla. They split a bottle of wine and ate takeout out of paper containers, surrounded by the soft glow of the installation lighting. "I've been thinking," Calla said. "You ever wonder what you would have done if Darian had walked up to you that night?" "I expected him to," Celia said, sipping her wine. "But I hoped he wouldn't." "Why?" "Because I didn't want to have to say no to a man I used to say yes to so easily." Calla nodded slowly. "Do you still love him?" Celia leaned her head back against the wall. "I love who he was, who we were, and now I love me more." Calla smiled. "That's not selfish," she said. "That's survival." Celia raised her glass. "To survival." They clinked quietly. Meanwhile, Darian sat alone in the penthouse, scrolling through real estate listings. Not investments, homes, places that felt more like what they used to share. He didn't want 6,000 square feet and 10-foot chandeliers. He wanted wood floors, narrow hallways, light that hit just right in the mornings. He'd give up the skyline for a kitchen that made space for 2 people dancing barefoot. The empire still ran. The money still grew. But none of it mattered. Not if he had no one to share the silence with. He visited his mother the next day. She hadn't seen him in weeks. "You look thinner," she said. "And older." "Thanks," he replied with a tired smile. She poured tea and sat beside him on the porch of her small home just outside the city. "You always said you never wanted to be like Dad," she said. "I'm not." "He never cheated either. But he made your mother feel small." Darian looked down at his hands. "I never meant to." She reached over and touched his wrist gently. "I know. But you did. Did you always know he was hurting you?" She smiled faintly. "I didn't need bruises to feel broken." Darian swallowed, then whispered, "She left with peace, and I didn't try to stop her." His mother nodded. "Maybe because you knew she shouldn't have had to ask for peace in the first place." Celia spent Sunday painting. Not for a client, not for a gallery. Just for herself. A canvas leaned against the window. She painted with thick strokes, bold colors, no plan. Her playlist hummed softly in the background, and her body moved with the music. Her phone rang once. She didn't check who it was. She just kept painting. Not because she was pretending to be okay, but because she was. Healing didn't need witnesses. It only needed permission, and she had finally given herself that. Celia woke up on Monday to the soft hum of rain against her windows. It used to be her favorite kind of morning. When she was still living in the penthouse, she'd curl up near the large pane of glass, sipping tea while Darian slept in late, their lives briefly slowed by weather. Now, she walked barefoot across her loft's wooden floor, the rain still her companion. But the silence was different. Not lonely, just hers. She made toast. No fuss, no breakfast spreads. Just 2 slices, golden and warm, stacked on a plate she bought from a second-hand shop for no reason other than it made her smile. Her gallery had been open for 3 weeks now. The press buzz had slowed. The attention faded. But her clarity remained, and she wasn't chasing noise anymore. At his office, Darian sat across from a new consultant hired by the board. She was young, sharp, and efficient. But halfway through her pitch about rebranding the company's next phase, he interrupted. "I'm stepping back." She blinked. "Sorry, I won't be on the next campaign. I won't do the Forbes follow-up. I don't need another keynote." The room went silent. His assistant, seated in the corner, looked up. "Sir, are you sure?" she asked carefully. He nodded. "I don't want to be a face. I want to go back to being a builder." The consultant cleared her throat. "And what will that look like?" "Something smaller," Darian said. "Something real." They exchanged glances, unsure how to respond. But Darian already knew. He didn't need their approval anymore. That evening, he walked through an open space on the north side. High ceilings, brick walls, the smell of sawdust and forgotten history. He asked the realtor to leave him alone for a few minutes, then stood in the middle of the room. It didn't feel like power. It felt like possibility. He imagined a workbench near the window, simple wood furniture, a tiny office where he could sketch, write, rebuild, away from cameras. No headlines, no speeches, no elevator rides to floors guarded by security. Just hands-on work, real again. Celia returned home after a long day of planning a new exhibit. She kicked off her shoes, set her bag down, and noticed a package on the floor just inside her door. No label, no note, just wrapped in plain brown paper. She opened it. Inside, a wooden frame. Inside the frame, a photograph she hadn't seen in years. It was the one from Venice, the same Darian had once shown her on his phone, the one where they were mid-laugh, her head thrown back, his eyes only on her. Behind the photo, a note. For the moment before everything changed, and for the version of me who forgot what mattered. No ask, no expectation, just a thank you. D. She held it in her lap for a long time. Didn't cry, didn't smile, just held it. Because it mattered, even if nothing changed after. Darian walked through an old neighborhood the next day, past the bookstore where Celia used to browse on Sundays, the bakery they once walked to for warm bread, the bench where they once sat for an hour in silence, just holding hands, watching dogs play in the park. He didn't stop at any of them. He didn't text her. He didn't chase. He just walked. Because chasing someone isn't the same as being ready for them, and he wasn't ready when she needed him most. Now, he wasn't trying to win her. He was trying to become someone worthy, whether or not she ever looked back. That weekend, Celia hosted a small private session at her gallery. Young designers, mostly women. She stood in front of them, not as someone who had it all together, but as someone who had learned what to let go of. Design isn't about perfection, she told them. It's about presence. And sometimes, the most important thing we build is our own life. A hand went up in the back. Did something happen that made you realize that? She smiled softly. Yes. Someone forgot I was human. And I forgot too, for a while. But now I remember. They nodded. They understood. That night, she placed the photo frame on her shelf. Not hidden. Not front and center either. Just there. A reminder of something real. Something beautiful. Something finished. But not erased. Celia stood in front of her gallery window, watching the late morning sun flood the room with light. The reflections bounced off the steel frames and gently touched the concrete floors like a quiet blessing. She didn't rush to open. Today wasn't about sales or press or foot traffic. Today was hers. She pulled out a fresh white canvas and set it on the central pedestal. No plan, no sketch, no measurements, just space. She picked up a brush. The first stroke was blue, deep, like dusk. The second, copper, like autumn light hitting glass. She lost herself in it for 2 hours. No music, no distractions, only creation, only clarity. At the penthouse, Darian held the keys to the new space he'd signed for. He hadn't told anyone yet. Not the board, not the press, not even his assistant. It wasn't for optics. It was for breath. The space was small. A former furniture repair shop with tools still hanging on rusted hooks. Nothing elegant. No granite, no chrome. Just real materials and the smell of aged wood and dust. He ran his hand along the old workbench, felt the grain of oak beneath his fingers. He planned to keep it. He didn't know what he was building yet, but he knew what he wasn't building anymore: illusions. Celia's day passed quietly. A few guests walked in, mostly regulars now, people who came to sit, think, and feel. The gallery had become something more than she intended, a sanctuary for those finding their voice again. A woman in her 60s sat in front of recognition for nearly 20 minutes. When she stood, she approached Celia. "I lost my husband 3 years ago," she said. "Not to death, to silence. Thank you for making this space." Celia smiled gently. "Thank you for seeing it." The woman nodded and left. That was the whole exchange, but it stayed with her for the rest of the day. She didn't need applause. Darian stood in the middle of his new space at sundown. He took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves. Then he picked up a broom and started clearing dust from the corners. No music, no calls, just him. The room was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. That night, Celia stopped by her favorite bookstore. She hadn't been in months. The same man behind the counter still wore the round glasses and knit cardigan she remembered. "Look who finally came home," he said. She smiled. "I'm rebuilding." He handed her a book without saying a word. She flipped it open. A quote, underlined in pencil. "You do not have to be whole to be healed." She bought it. No bag. Just carried it under her arm like something sacred. She walked home that night slowly. No rush, no calls to return, no weight in her chest. She passed the river, paused on a bridge, and closed her eyes. A breeze lifted her hair. And in that moment she thought, I didn't just survive him, I remembered me. 3 weeks after the gallery's opening, Celia received an invitation to speak at a women's design summit in Detroit. The email was warm and respectful. No mention of her marriage, no tabloid references. Just her work, just her. She read it twice, then closed her laptop. It wasn't about the opportunity. It was about how it landed, quietly, without noise or pressure, as if the universe was nudging her, saying, "This next part is yours." She picked up her phone and called the number at the bottom of the email. "I'll be honored," she said. Later that afternoon, Celia returned to the gallery. The door was already unlocked. Her breath caught. She stepped inside slowly, expecting a break-in. But nothing was missing. Everything in place. Except, on the main pedestal sat a small wooden sculpture. Something new, something not hers. It was a replica of her light installation, carved in oak, but simplified, reimagined. It bore no label, no note, only a small card tucked underneath. I remembered this with my hands. No tools but memory. She didn't cry, but she sat beside it for a long time. She hadn't seen him since the gallery opening. He hadn't asked for anything since. No pressure, No demand, not even a conversation, just presence in quiet forms. She left the sculpture exactly where it was, didn't text, didn't return it, didn't question the gesture, because sometimes peace lives in unanswered acknowledgements. Darian returned to his new workshop the same evening. He didn't wait for her to respond. That wasn't the point. He worked on a simple side table, nothing fancy, a blend of oak and matte brass, something you couldn't buy in any of his buildings. He sanded for hours, steady, quiet, focused. When he finished, he sat on the floor beside it. He wasn't used to feeling without fixing. Now, he let the feeling stay. Meanwhile, Celia hosted her final gallery night of the season. It wasn't advertised. It wasn't catered. It wasn't dressed up. She sent personal invitations to 20 people who had written letters, shared stories, or left quietly profound comments in the guest book. It was a celebration not of closure, but of continuation. Her speech was short. "I thought I was building a gallery," she said, "but I was building a mirror, and the most beautiful part of reflection is how many faces you can see." They clapped softly, but she didn't look for anyone in the room. She had already seen what she needed to see, in herself. After the guests left, she dimmed the lights, closed the doors, and stood alone beneath her favorite piece. She whispered, more to herself than anyone, "Thank you, Celia, for coming back." At that exact moment, Darian stood on the other side of the city, wiping dust off his hands. He looked at the small sign he'd just hung by the door of his new space, Foundry. Handmade things, no fanfare, no ribbon, just a beginning. And this time, not for the world, but for the man who had finally learned to be still long enough to see what love looked like when it was no longer his. The press finally caught on. It started as a small column in a local lifestyle magazine, a paragraph buried under gallery news and interviews. Just a few lines about Celia Tranier, independent artist, rising designer, former wife of Darian Holt. But that was enough. By the end of the week, headlines spread across media outlets. Celia Tranier shines without Holt. The quiet exit, how a designer reclaimed her story. From Billionaire's wife to voice of the city. It wasn't malicious. In fact, most of it was respectful, admirational even. But Darian felt the shift, not because the world was mocking him, but because the world finally saw her, on her own, without needing to mention him. And for the first time in his life, Darian Holt wasn't the story. She was. And it felt exactly as it should. At a board meeting that Friday, his legal team gently raised the subject. "There's a small PR issue building," one of the partners said. "It's not an attack, just the narrative is shifting." "Let it," Darian replied, without looking up. Another board member spoke, more cautiously. "Some investors are concerned about your absence lately. You've missed 4 major appearances. They're asking for reassurance." Darian closed the folder in front of him. "My wife left." Silence filled the room. "I built an empire and lost her in the process. I need time to figure out who I am outside of this." Someone shifted in their seat. Another coughed. Darian raised his gaze slowly. "I'm not stepping down, but I am stepping back. If that makes anyone nervous, you're welcome to resign your position." No one spoke after that. Because money respected certainty, and Darian, even in stillness, was certain. Celia sat in the back garden of a small cafe in Logan Square, sipping coffee and sketching on a napkin. Her gallery schedule had slowed. She planned to close the space for winter, renovate lightly, and reopen with new installations in spring. She wasn't running from anything. She was making room. Calla joined her 20 minutes late, wrapped in a thick scarf. "I brought scones to bribe you for my lateness," she said, dropping the bag on the table. Celia grinned. Bribe accepted. They ate in silence for a while. Comfortable, easy. Then Calla asked, "You seen the headlines?" Celia nodded. "You okay with it?" "I'm not interested in what they say, but it's your story now." Celia folded the napkin slowly, setting it aside. "It always was. I just stopped handing them the pen." Calla smiled. I'd pay good money to see his face when he reads them. I don't think he's angry, Celia said. I think he's listening. And she was right. Darian didn't call, didn't release a statement, didn't leak stories to clean his image. He sat on the balcony of his new workspace, sipping coffee from a chipped mug, watching the sun move across the city he used to try to conquer. Now he simply watched it, let it be, and slowly, without any pressure, he started building small things again. Tables, frames, shelves, nothing complicated, everything grounded. One afternoon, as he sanded down the edge of a handmade bench, his assistant stopped by. She held up a folder. Press request from a new outlet. Big feature. Want it? He paused, wiped his hands on a rag. What's the headline? She flipped it open. They're calling it The Quiet Season of Darian Holt. He chuckled once. Let them write it. She hesitated. They want to include quotes about Celia. He didn't blink. Tell them this, he said. I used to build towers for praise. She builds rooms for reflection. Her silence taught me everything I needed to hear. She wrote it down slowly, then nodded and left. He didn't watch her go. He just kept sanding. Celia walked into the gallery 2 hours before opening. She didn't flip the lights on. She walked through the space quietly, barefoot, hands trailing along the edges of each sculpture, each frame, each memory. This place had been her sanctuary, her classroom, her mirror, and now it was preparing to sleep for the winter. She stood in front of recognition, the centerpiece, the tall, twisting column of glass and steel that had started it all. Today would be the final open day before the seasonal close. No big event, no speech. Just one more day for those who needed it. Then it would rest, and so would she. Darian wasn't planning to visit the gallery again, not because he didn't want to, because he respected the silence she had crafted. But that morning, something shifted. He stood in front of a wall at his new space, the foundry, gazing at a large canvas he'd found in a thrift shop. Blank, torn at the corners. It looked ruined. He planned to repurpose it, but now he couldn't bring himself to paint over it. It already spoke. It had already survived, just like her. Walked through the streets of West Loop, coat undone, collar loose, pace unhurried. He didn't know where he was going until he was standing in front of her gallery again. He hesitated. The lights were dim inside, but open. He stepped in. No one was near the door, just the sound of soft instrumental piano playing low in the background. She appeared from a side room moments later, holding a clipboard, hair tied back, paint on her wrist. When she saw him, she didn't freeze. She didn't smile. She nodded. Once. Hi, he said. Hi. No bitterness. No weight. Just two people standing in a space built out of everything they didn't say. They walked side by side through the gallery, not touching, not talking yet, just moving. At recognition, they stopped. Darian looked at the light bouncing off the mirrors. I still remember the day you drew this. I still remember the day you stopped asking to see what I was working on, she replied. Silence, but not hostile, just real. He turned to face her fully. I didn't come here to fix anything. I know. I just wanted to stand in a room where I could tell the truth. Celia waited. He took a breath. I was so busy trying to prove I deserved the world that I forgot to protect the one person who made it worth having. She said nothing, but her eyes didn't look away. He continued. You didn't leave with noise. You left with clarity. And it's taken me this long to understand the weight of that silence. Still, she waited. Thank you, he finished. For what? For not coming back when it was easy. For letting me sit with the version of myself I never wanted to see. Celia looked down, then back up. Her voice was quiet. But sure, I didn't leave to hurt you. I left to hear myself again. And once I did, I didn't want to go back to drowning. He nodded. I understand now. They didn't talk about reconciliation, or the past, or the future. They stood in the gallery for 10 more minutes, walking slowly. Then she turned to him at the door. I hope you build something beautiful over there. I'm trying. He hesitated. You're always welcome to visit. no expectations. Celia gave a soft smile. "And you're always welcome to keep walking." She opened the door for him. He stepped out into the winter air, and she closed the door behind him, gently. That evening, Celia lit one final candle in the gallery before turning off the lights for the season. She stood alone under the beam of moonlight coming through the skylight, surrounded by pieces that no longer needed explanation. Not everything had to be resolved. Some things just needed to be respected. The gallery was dark now, the walls bare, the floors echoing with quiet instead of conversation. Winter had come early to Chicago. Snow dusted the sidewalks, and the city moved a little slower. Celia wasn't bothered by the cold. Her world had already been quiet long before the seasons changed. She spent her mornings walking, long walks through streets she hadn't explored in years, past flower shops, independent bookstores, underused parks. The kind of places no one posts about, but still exist like secrets waiting to be seen. In the afternoons she worked on the next collection, something softer this time, more personal, less structural, not about pain, not even about healing, just about being, existing, breathing, living in the middle of what comes next. At the foundry, Darian was doing the same. His days were simple now. Mornings began with hands in sawdust, shaping edges, tightening joints, sanding surfaces until they felt like memory. He started sleeping better, head against a pillow instead of buried in quarterly projections. He built furniture slowly, not for clients, for himself, for space, for clarity. And though he didn't say it out loud, everything he built was a silent conversation with Celia. He didn't ask her to see it. He didn't send photos. He simply made it. And in doing so, made a version of himself that didn't need to be seen to be real. One afternoon, a teenage girl wandered into Celia's closed gallery. Celia had left the door slightly ajar as she painted in the back. The girl didn't speak. She just stood quietly in the main room, staring at a single unfinished canvas left leaning on a wall. Celia stepped out moments later, surprised but calm. "Hi," she said gently. "I'm sorry. I saw the door and I didn't know if it was open." Celia nodded. "You're fine." The girl looked at the painting again. "It feels like something I'd cry in front of." Celia stepped beside her. "Sometimes that's the point." The girl turned. "Did you make all these?" "Yes." The girl hesitated. "How do you know when something's finished?" Celia smiled. "When it stops asking me to explain it." That night, she journaled. "I think I'm falling in love with the quiet, not the absence of others, but the presence of me." She didn't write Darian's name, not because she had forgotten him, but because she no longer needed him to be the reason for any sentence. Darian returned home late that same evening. The penthouse was still technically his, but he hadn't slept there in weeks. Tonight, he made tea, sat in the chair she used to sit in, and stared at a photo of her gallery clipped from a newspaper article. He read the headline again, "A space for those who walked away without burning the bridge." It wasn't about him, but it carried him, gently, into a quiet sleep. The next morning, Celia opened her inbox to a message from the summit organizers in Detroit. They had seen the gallery coverage, read the guest feedback, and wanted her to headline the spring session, not as a designer, not as the ex-wife of, but as a builder of reflective space, a woman who had redefined public healing through private clarity. She accepted, no hesitation this time. The day of her flight, the weather broke. Snow melted into soft slush. The streets looked cleaner, the city less grey. She packed one carry-on bag, her journal, and a single framed sketch, a blueprint of recognition, not to show on stage, just to hold in her hotel room. When she landed, the event team greeted her warmly, not with handlers or flashing lights, but quiet efficiency and calm smiles. She liked that. She wasn't here to be a spectacle. She was here to share. Meanwhile, Darian stood in the middle of the foundry, polishing a curved coffee table he'd spent 10 days shaping. He didn't know Celia was in Detroit. He hadn't followed her schedule in weeks. Not because he didn't care, because he no longer tracked her like a man afraid of losing. He respected distance now. Because he understood space didn't always mean absence. Sometimes it was trust. Celia stood backstage, mic clipped, notes folded. She didn't need to rehearse. This wasn't a performance. When the stage lights dimmed and her name was called, she stepped out in black slacks, a soft beige blouse and flats. Nothing dramatic, no flashy entrance. She spoke quietly, but every seat leaned forward. I once lived in a glass house, built with ambition and polished with control. It had marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, power in every corner. And yet, I couldn't hear myself think, because silence in a life that doesn't see you isn't peace. It's erasure. So, I left, not with noise, but with truth, and I built a gallery, not for fame, not for healing, for recognition, of the woman I used to be before I muted her, and through that, I found everything I didn't know I'd lost. The room stayed silent long after she finished, not because they didn't know what to say, but because everything they might have said had already been spoken by the weight of her presence. She stepped off the stage with no applause chasing her, and she liked it that way. The next morning, she received a text from a number she didn't recognize at first. Saw a clip from your talk, didn't expect to, didn't plan to, but I watched the whole thing. You were never the woman behind me. You were always the one I should have been following. D. She stared at the message for a long time, then typed, "Thank you. Not for watching, for finally seeing." She hit send and felt nothing crumble, only lightness. Celia returned to Chicago 2 days after the summit. Her phone had filled with messages, some from attendees, others from strangers who had seen snippets of her speech online. Her words had found people, quiet people, people in transition, people who had walked away from places that no longer reflected them. She read every message, replied to most, but didn't let them define her, because she knew what validation felt like when it was borrowed, and what it felt like when it was built. This, she built. The gallery stayed closed for winter, but Celia visited it every morning. She didn't unlock the doors. She simply walked through, checked the humidity levels, and touched the walls lightly as she moved through the space. She didn't miss the noise. She missed the presence. She missed the ritual of reflection. And she was learning how to give it to herself without performance. Some days she painted. Some days she didn't. And that was okay. One evening, while rearranging a few boxes in the back office, she came across something unexpected. A note, folded and tucked inside an old sketchbook. She recognized the handwriting instantly. It was hers, but it wasn't recent. It was a letter she had written to herself in the first month of her marriage. Tucked away, maybe as a journal exercise, maybe as a reminder. She sat down and read it. If ever you forget how loved you are, if ever the world becomes too loud, if ever the man beside you becomes quieter than your own breath, return here, to this page, to this moment, where you promised yourself you'd never vanish inside anyone, even someone you love. Her chest ached softly, not with regret, with gratitude, for the woman who wrote it, and for the one who came back to find it. Darian walked through a quiet downtown art supply store that same day. He wasn't shopping for anything in particular, just moving through spaces that felt honest. The owner, an older man with paint-splattered jeans, nodded at him. Looking for something specific? No, Darian said. The man smiled. Sometimes that's how you find what matters. He picked up a small journal with unlined pages and bought it without thinking. That night, back at the foundry, he opened it and began to write. Not plans, not strategy, just a thought. I used to build for applause. Now I build to stay human. He kept writing. Every night for a week. No one read the pages but him, and for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Celia got an email from an art collector in New York asking if she'd consider moving the gallery east. He offered full backing, high exposure, media partnerships. She declined, not because it wasn't tempting, but because that version of success no longer fit the woman she had become. If her work reached people, it would be because they came to her, walked into a space built with stillness and grace. She wasn't chasing anymore. She was choosing. It snowed the night before she reopened the gallery. Not a blizzard, just a soft, steady fall that blanketed the sidewalks and silenced the city's usual hum. Celia stood at the entrance that morning, with her gloved hands pressed against the door, watching as the light broke through clouds and painted the street in pale gold. She unlocked the door slowly. No ribbon, no announcement, just a quiet opening. The way it all began. Inside, the space looked nearly the same, but it felt different. She had replaced one wall's hanging with a new piece, unfinished brushstrokes layered on glass. No name, no description. Some guests walked past it without stopping. Others stared for minutes. When asked what it was, she simply said, "A piece in progress." No one argued, because everyone, in their own way, understood. By noon, the gallery had a slow trickle of visitors. 2 women from Milwaukee, a teacher from Evanston, a couple who had read about it online and said they just wanted to feel something that didn't ask them to explain why. Celia moved through the space with soft steps, nodding, answering quiet questions, pouring tea at the back for anyone who needed warmth. She wasn't a curator anymore. She was a witness to stillness, to change, to return. Around 3 p.m., the door opened again. And for the first time in months, Darian walked in. No coat, no entourage, just a soft navy sweater and quiet eyes. He carried something wrapped in brown paper. She didn't freeze. She didn't rush to meet him. She simply stood at the edge of the nearest exhibit and let him come to her. He stopped in front of her, holding out the package. She accepted it, careful but not fragile. Inside, a small stool, hand-carved, oak, sanded smooth. A single word engraved underneath the seat, "Still." Celia traced the grain with her fingertips, then looked up. He spoke first. "I didn't come to ask for anything. I know. I just wanted to place this here. For anyone who walks in needing to sit with their quiet." She looked at him, her gaze steady. "Where should I put it?" "Anywhere the silence is most honest." She nodded, then turned and walked toward the center of the gallery. She placed the stool directly beneath recognition and left it there. No plaque, no explanation, just presence. Darian didn't linger. He nodded once, gently, then turned and walked back out into the snow. Celia watched him go, not with longing, not with regret, but with the same grace she had given herself all year, a knowing, a truth. Some stories don't need reunion. Some need respect. Some need to end quietly, so the woman inside them can begin again, fully. That night, she lit a candle in the center of the gallery. No music played. No one else stood beside her. And yet, she felt surrounded by memory, by growth, by her own resilience. She whispered aloud, "I am not what I lost. I am what I chose after." If you've ever walked away from a love that didn't see you, if you've ever rebuilt not with noise, but with dignity, brick by brick, you're not alone. Tell us below, what did Celia's strength remind you of? And if this story helped you feel heard, subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories, where silence speaks louder than excuses, and where dignity always wins.